the first player born in 1993 to appear in the major leagues, and he cranks one high and deep to right field. It is way back. Goodbye. Welcome to the big leagues. A home run in his first major league at bat.
First time up in the big leagues. Here's the 1-1 pitch. He swings and hits a high fly ball to left field. It's deep. It's up and away into the last row of the bleachers. In his first major league at bat.
Welcome to the Prospect Promotion Incentive, a podcast covering the players climbing the minor league ladder on their way to dominate the future of Major League Baseball. Here are your hosts, Beck and Scully.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's Prospect Promotion Incentive podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 24th. Beck, how are we doing?
We are doing excellent. We just had to break away from the Chase Burns start to record. I felt like both of us were okay with pushing back the recording multiple times just so we could watch Chase Burns, who was and is, I don't know if he's still going, electric in his MLB debut.
Yeah, he did make it through 5, and they've taken him out, but just a dominant start. I felt bad. I was following on my phone for his first 3 clean innings, and as I turned it on, Ben Rice hit that home run, and the defense kind of let him down in that inning to give up a few runs, but I did get to see the dominance online at least, and he looks like the real deal, like we expected.
Very few major league pitchers I would not trade for Chase Burns right now. I was supposed to see him in St. Paul on Tuesday, but and I made this plan for a week. I was like trying to project out when his next start would be. I was aligning my work schedule with Chase Burns' start and found out Saturday or Sunday that he was being called up. So really exciting to see him pitch and pitch well in his debut. I did pull a stat in 4 innings against Chase Burns in May. The West Michigan Whitecaps put up 3 hits, 2 runs, 2 homers, and the Yankees for the first 2 innings against Chase Burns, 1 hit, 6 strikeouts. So something to think about. Get ready to learn Midwest League.
Yeah, makes you wonder how the Whitecaps would do in the AL East this year. I think they might be able to hold their own.
Maybe they could. The other thing that I wanted to bounce off of you, Skull, and I've kind of been doing this on my own without your input, is just referring to our vast listenership as the PP heads. How do you feel about that?
I think it rolls off the tongue. And I guess we would be PP heads. We listen to the pod. It's good to get film on yourself sometimes. So I'm comfortable being referred to as such, but I'd love to hear from our listeners, maybe in the comments section, how that goes. And if we could make some merch with that, I think PP heads could catch on.
I think so too. We're all prospect promotion heads because that's what that means.
Yes. Yeah. Don't get it twisted. We're not saying anything else. We are PP heads. We are prospect promotion nuts.
Yes.
You made an appearance on another podcast this week, and we may have some additional listeners coming in from that. You want to talk about your Toolshed appearance this week?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to hang out with Eric Cross. I was just going to stop at Eric because I feel like we're buddies now. Scully and I have spent the last few late October into early November sort of stints at the AFL with Eric, sharing an Airbnb. So always good to see him. We had the opportunity to talk some promotions, as is customary when I'm on a podcast, and break down a little bit of the brewer system, which is really exciting and sort of lethal at Carolina this year. So if you get the opportunity, would recommend checking out the Toolshed this week. If you have not heard of Eric's work and you're listening to this podcast somehow, go check him out on Twitter. I believe he just changed his handle this year to @EricCross. That is CROSSMLB.
Very nice. Yeah, it was awesome to hear you guys catch up. I had a little bit of FOMO, but also felt like I was just with the boys down in Arizona again. So absolutely hope we got some listeners from that. Moving into our agenda, this first section we've got here is called Did You See This? Some news from all sorts of ball over the past week. And the first one here kind of put a bow on the College World Series, as we've been keeping everyone updated there. The Tigers won their second title in the last 3 years, and they kind of dominated. It looked like kind of another class from Coastal, but Coastal fought, they were relatively close games. Obviously both 1-0 and then 5-3, I want to say was the second one. But LSU only needed 3 pitchers to get it done in the 2-game series because Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson shoved Anderson to the tune of a complete game shutout where they let him go 130 pitches. But the way he was looking, you could not get him off the mound that night.
Yeah, it was shades of Quinn Matthews a few years prior, just letting the pitch count ride. I saw a lot of pitch count discourse following that outing, and it's a little bit different in Major League Baseball where you're on a 5-day schedule. College, pretty typically you're pitching once a week. You are the Friday night starter or the Saturday night starter or what have you, but you're playing games throughout the week that, you're not appearing in. It's, you're going once every 7 days instead of once every 5. That's not to say that there isn't sort of rampant arm abuse across the baseball landscape, not limited to college. But when a guy is going as well as Cade Anderson was going, and the risk of injury is relatively low, and they might not have the opportunity to be in that sort of moment ever again, it's really hard to take that away from somebody. So kudos to Cade Anderson. What a gutsy performance. The one thing that I need to ask you about, because I didn't have the opportunity to watch game 2, I was at Twins Brewers on Sunday with my father-in-law and my wife. What was up with the ejection in the first inning?
Yeah, so if you didn't watch as well, Coastal's manager and first base coach. The first base coach was one of the bigger instigators in the whole situation, but they got ejected in the bottom of the first inning for arguing balls and strikes excessively, as the NCAA defined it. And it was a quick hook, but as the game went on, they kind of described what the rule is and how the NCAA was enforcing and viewing this. And by the letter of the law, they deserved to be ejected. You can't argue balls and strikes, and you can't leave the dugout after you've been told to not leave the dugout and argue balls and strikes. So it was warning, and then 10 seconds later, ejection, while the Coastal manager was trying to understand why he got a warning in the first place. And that's what was him coming out of the dugout to say, why did you just warn me? What are you talking about? Talk to me. And the umpire had a very short fuse with that and ejected both of them. They would have been they would have been suspended for a game 3 if that happened. And technically they won't be able to coach the first 2 games of the season next year because that will carry over. So they got that extra suspension added on for the excessive portion of the arguing.
I sort of understand wanting to hold everybody accountable and go by the letter of the law. If you're an umpire, that's sort of your job, but also have some feel for the moment. You can't be doing that in the first inning of an elimination game. And maybe that game goes a little bit differently if they have their head coach.
Yeah, it was very pick-me energy from the umps that night or that day. It was a day game, game 2. But yeah, they try to justify their way out of it. That I understand the letter of the law, but feel the moment and understand that just can't happen. And we'll never know how much that impacted Jacob Morrison, who didn't quite have his stuff that day, and the rest of the game for how it kind of unfolded for Coastal. We'll never know, but it was just a tough way to see their season end.
Yeah, definitely tough. Congratulations to the Tigers, LSU. They're bringing home second College World Series in 3 years. That is an incredible feat. And they've done it, kind of throughout the years with really excellent pitching. So, congratulations to them. It sort of sucks for them too, that their College World Series win is a little bit overshadowed by, what the ump crew decided to do on Sunday.
Yeah. Dominant pitching, like you said, and both those guys are going to be drafted possibly in the first round. Ianson, another guy that could have easily raised his stock with his College World Series performances. But congrats, Tigers.
I don't know why this is coming to mind right now, and this was not on our rundown, but when we were in Arizona last fall, we had the opportunity to see Team USA scrimmage. And do you remember the third base coach from that squad? He was hanging out by the chain link fence where we were sitting for a little while.
Not vividly.
Okay. Well, his son, a member of the Dynasty Dugout, DM'd me the other day and sent me his Max Preps page and his, some of his high school stats. He is on Corona High School their baseball squad alongside Billy Carlson and Seth Hernandez. So 3 really big draft prospects on that Corona high school squad. Both of those LSU pitchers potentially going in the first round made me think about just really stacked teams. And Corona, I mean, the most stacked team in the nation. So that just sort of jogged my memory.
Yeah, there was someone next to us in the stands that was talking about their coaching at one of the coach's son was at Corona. So it might have been him that we heard when he was talking to someone next to us. Yeah, now it's all kind of coming together. That's kind of crazy. And those stacked high schools, that's not sort of like a bloodline, something that, it's kind of recognizable when you see one. We'll call one of them out later in the pod when we talk about one of our promos.
Brady Ebel, he's 17, plays for Corona. Baseball America had him the number 8 prospect in the 2025 draft. He was committed to LSU, so this is tying a nice bow. Their most recent update has him 38, giving him a 55 grade overall, 50 on the power, 55 on the power, 50 on the hit, 40 run, 50 field, 50 arm. Still has that LSU commitment. So we'll see if, he's going to be bought out of that college commitment. Born in 2007, which feels very strange.
Ow. That made my chest hurt.
2 other topics for us to banter about quickly. 1, Francisco Alvarez hits a 452-foot home run, and he's rewarded with being optioned. Now, I have not pulled up his recent stats. He was not playing well, I can tell you that much. Just funny timing that he hit a 450-foot bomb. The Mets must have wanted 453 for him to buy another day on the 25-man.
I do wonder if there was a distance that would have made them reconsider this. I mean, 452 is a bomb, but, if it would have been 475, or they're like, let's give him a shot. Maybe he's figured something out.
Yeah, let's wait this out. Let's see. He's really clicking now. He got that one flush.
Yeah, I'm curious about how his defensive performance was looking too. That always seemed to be like the biggest question mark with him. Was he going to be able to come along defensively? And he had, especially last year, part of his breakout. So wonder if it's purely to go work on the bat. But if he was playing like an average to above defensive catcher, then I'm kind of surprised at the move even more than I already am. Yeah, the stats weren't good, but he was also coming off a hamate injury a couple of months ago, maybe a month and a half now. But yeah, just kind of surprised to have seen that his stats weren't up to their liking.
Okay, so Savant had his fielding run value at a -1, his blocks above average at 0. He was throwing a lot of guys out. The framing was where things really went poorly. He was one of the worst framers in baseball. He was whiffing a lot. He was chasing a fair bit. The results, not great. A 236 average, a 319 OBP. Just wasn't really hitting for any power either. A 333 slug. Just 3 home runs and 138 plate appearances. I think that has a lot to do with the hamate injury. But yeah, I mean, just the timing was funny. I felt like we had to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last year was Denzel Clark. Not swinging the bat very well, but he's like this generation's Kevin Kiermaier. He's been unbelievable, posting a positive WAR value while carrying a WRC plus right around 50.
Going to be a very interesting WAR output by the end of the year. I'm very curious by this because, yeah, he's, could be going up there without a bat and maybe be having better outcomes than this right now. But the glove is so good in the outfield. I think it's 3 straight weeks that he's had the quote unquote play of the week awarded by the MLB. So every day, it seems like, or every series, he's putting up a #1 web gem of the week that you just have to see while being absolutely dreadful at the plate. It's incredibly polarizing.
So 2 thoughts there. We should track his WAR value as each week marches on and see what that looks like if the bat doesn't come around. The other thought that I'm having is, it's a universal designated hitter now. Do you have to use it on the pitcher?
No, I don't think you do. So I don't know if they have any bats that can also pitch for the Athletics, but yeah, that's a very interesting thought.
maybe they should explore it. I mean, I have some faith that Denzel Clark will turn it around at the plate. He's been a pretty good offensive player for his entire minor league career, but the numbers are pretty stunning here, just how positive he's been with the glove. And, the bat doesn't really even seem to matter because he is making the only thing that falls when he's out there is raindrops.
Yep. And you got to think the glove keeps him in the mix for the big league spot, even if the bat's not performing at all. But
I was being very generous with the bat. It is a 28 WRC plus through 25 games. Granted, only 87 plate appearances, a 44.8% strikeout rate, a 2.3% walk rate. This is an incredibly small sample, and he, obviously has been better throughout the duration of his minor league career. Only once did he have a WRC plus in minor league baseball below 100, and that was for a 51 game stint in high A in 2022. He has had some trouble with strikeouts. His career minor league strikeout rate right around 30%. So not incredibly surprising that he is having a little bit of bat to ball issues at the major league level, but I would expect this to turn around. He's not a true talent 28 WRC plus player.
Yeah. While he figures that out, we'll just enjoy the glove for now.
Yes. Actually, the problem looks to be when he swings out of the zone, which is relatively often, 27.1% of the time, he just never really makes contact. He has a 35% contact rate on pitches outside of the zone. So, and even when you are making contact with pitches that you probably shouldn't be swinging at, the results are going to be bad. So he can turn it around, but what a talent with the glove. Our national holiday this year for our prospect comps is National Pralines Day. I was unfamiliar with pralines when you sent the list of possible options. So I'm going to let you go first with your praline prospect comp.
Yeah, so praline is like a nut. So a lot of like pecans would fall into that, pecans, however you want to pronounce that. And so without coming up with a better or more creative comp, I went with a very literal one and started to look at one of my favorite mascots, kind of a callback to last week, but the Modesto Nuts. So we got a couple of nuts to talk about. This is the Seattle Mariners low A squad. And so in my research, I found Carlos Jimenez, outfielder on that team, and he signed for just shy of $500,000 back in 2019 as a 16-year-old. He's about 5'10", 170. So it's kind of been, living down there in the low minors, but he's having a really good year. And actually, if you include last year's low A stats, which I did here, has put together a good 81 game sample. He's slashed 276, 372, 449 with 12 homers, 30 steals, 27 doubles, 9 triples, and has been rocking about a 130 WRC plus while walking 15% of the time. So having really good success at the plate. And when I was looking deeper into his Fangraphs numbers, I came across his pull and fly ball rate. And I just kind of I don't know what the good ranges are for these, so I wanted to bounce them off you. He's at about a 45 to 50% pull. Where does that rate in the pantheon of pull rates?
That would be a pretty strong pull rate. I mean, you divide the field into 3 sections. A totally even spray would be 33, 33, 33. Often we see guys maybe a little bit more up the middle. A 45% pull rate would be pretty pull heavy. 50% is very much so. What I really care about, and I just noticed that Savant has this on player pages now, and I'm wondering if they read my book. Just kidding. That almost certainly wasn't the inspiration there. But, a stat that I used throughout the book was a batted ball I referred to as an air pull 100, which was launch angle between 8 and 32 degrees at over 100 miles an hour and to the pull side. Savant now has air pull percentage, and I don't necessarily care if you're pulling the ball on the ground. I care if you are pulling it in the air. And I think those numbers, 45, 50% fly ball rate would be, again, very much so showcasing the ability to manipulate vertical spray. If you had both of those combined, Fangraphs isn't going to have that number for you. But if you have both of those combined, you can intuit pretty clearly that they're getting the ball to the pull side and in the air with some regularity.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going with this, is air pull being everybody's kind of favorite metric right now to evaluate young talent. And so pairing that pull with about a 40% fly ball felt like I was coming across a candidate for good air pull numbers. So glad to hear that kind of being validated. But that's what I found about Carlos Jimenez.
Yeah, I'm also going to talk about a nut, a Modesto nut. This one a little bit more well-known. This is Ryan Sloan. He was the Mariners' second rounder out of high school last year. We're going to talk about nuts and butts because the first thing that I noticed when I saw Ryan Sloan pitch for the first time this year was he has a real pitcher's ass. He's a big kid. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. And I don't know if the Mariners just got all of their pitchers in the weight room doing squats all winter, but he has a pitcher's butt and he throws really hard with it. I think both the fastball and the slider are plus pitches right now. I've seen some publications put his changeup at plus already as well. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. So far this year, he has pitched in 11 games, totaling 41 innings. So he's averaging, between 3 and 4 innings a start, 46 strikeouts against 176 batters faced, just 10 walks. This is really early in a prep pitcher's career. This could go a lot of directions. I think Ryan Sloan is a top 100 prospect already. He has that kind of arm talent, that kind of frame, that kind of stuff. It's early to buy. So if you didn't get him in your FYPD, I probably wouldn't be shipping out any real talent to go get him. But I think he's one of a handful of players, pitchers in the lower minors right now that could eventually be the number one pitching prospect in baseball.
Yeah, he doesn't look like a prep pitcher with the frame and the way that he kind of delivers on the mound. We talk about Travis Sakura as being a fun watch in the low minors. Ryan Sloan is right there for me. Someone that I really wanted in FYPDs per the recommendation of Chris Clegg. Notably, I'm sure other people were hyping him up as well, but that's just who I saw talking about him and who got him on my radar. Wasn't able to make that happen, but Sloan is one that I've been a fan of for a long time and think he's got an up arrow trajectory for sure.
Yeah, he looks like a grown man. I feel like if he's from Illinois, if you just bumped him, a couple hours west to Nebraska, he's playing right tackle somewhere. He is a big boy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad that he made his way to the mound instead.
It is an athletic 6'5", 220 pounds. I don't mean to intimate that he is overweight or anything like that. It is, 6'5", 220 pounds of muscle. But you get him on a corn-fed diet, he's pushing guys around.
Yeah, and looks like the Mariners maybe have done that already.
All right, let's talk about some top performers from the previous week as we have a very lengthy agenda for you today. We're going to try and keep this under 90 minutes, but given that we are already over 20, we might need to move a little bit quick here. Top performers from the Threecap that went live today around 1 Eastern. The top hitter was Héctor Rodríguez, outfielder for the Cincinnati Reds. He is tearing up the Southern League. This week, he was 17 for 33 with 3 home runs, a triple, 3 doubles, 13 runs, which I think is the highest number that I've had in any Threecap this year through 12 weeks of that column, and 6 RBI. The big thing to know about Héctor Rodríguez is his swing decision profile has been incredibly spotty over the course of his minor league career. Last year, he carried a chase rate encroaching on 50%, and that number inflated to 55% with 2 strikes. So no real 2-strike approach to be heard of. And I thought that would continue. That's not usually something that is rectified very easily. That has a lot to do with how you're seeing the ball. Now, Héctor is very much a good hitter. He is carrying batting averages north of 300. He hits the ball harder than you might think, given his size. And the sort of revelation in 2025 has been his chase rate is looking more like average. It's closer to 30% this year than it was to 50% last year. And that is a really meaningful shift. I don't know where I would have him right now. It's a little bit confounding. It's sort of a smaller track record of plate discipline than we've seen from him before, but he's certainly a name that I'm monitoring that I think a lot of people jumped off of, and for good reason. If he keeps this up, and let's say he, finds himself in AAA by the end of the year, I think he, could be a real prospect worth watching, especially if some of his public StatCast data gets tossed around. I did, see some hype for him on Twitter this week. I still remain skeptical. I'm not saying he's a top 100 guy or anything to that effect, because the swing decisions are still pretty suspect. But far, far better in 2025.
Yeah, we've seen this profile a few times. PCA kind of comes to mind. And when he was in the minors, he was making contact with everything, but he was swinging at everything. And that was resulting in not getting your A swing or at least A contact off. But it's really tough to tell a guy who's hitting over 300 in Héctor Rodríguez's case and is making contact with most pitches he sees to stop swinging. It's just sort of a development and maturity thing that, they'll work on it with, but it's good to show that he's already making some progress. He was a big riser in Chris Clegg's updated June rankings. That's how he kind of came across my radar. I think he cracked into the top 250, maybe even 200. So someone that I am certainly intrigued with, and we'll be monitoring how he continues through AA.
I think that is a good point about it being sort of a developmental priority. Rodríguez has been around for a while, and I think the reason he hasn't moved as quickly as some of his peers, despite the performance he's put together, is because the team wanted him to work on his plate discipline. If you push a guy and he's not ready, it's embarrassing to see him fail for very predictable reasons. So hold him at a level that he can handle and let him work on a very specific skill for that time. I think that happens more than the public is aware, where players are just held at a particular level for much longer than you'd think. And it's because the team is privy to something developmentally that you are not on the public side. So I think that's been the story of Héctor Rodríguez's career so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our top pitcher from the Threecap this week was Carlos Lagrange, right-handed pitcher in the Yankees system. This week, he pitched 5 1/3. He gave up 3 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, struck out 12 in that outing. We've talked a little bit about him on the pod already this year. The thing you need to know about Lagrange is he is a stuff monster. He is 6'7", pretty stringy, about 200 pounds, and hums the fastball in there at or exceeding 100 miles an hour with some regularity. We had the opportunity to see him in the spring breakout in Florida in March, and he eclipsed 100 miles an hour multiple times with the fastball. He also has a breaking ball that has sort of changed shape a couple of times over the last couple of years, but gets pretty ridiculous results. I have sort of made this loose comp just based on his size and how hard he throws the ball, but he looks to me like a Jacob Misiorowski starter kit. It feels a little irresponsible to say that after what Misiorowski has done in his first 2 starts at the big league level, but there are parallels beyond his physicality and his stuff. Both struggled with command for a large duration of their careers. Lagrange, for his part, walked 20% of batters over 21 innings last year. Now, he was dealing with some lower back issues and was limited to just under 30 innings when you include the Arizona Fall League. But this year, he's walking right around 8% of batters, which is a huge material change. And with that kind of stuff, he's looking like one of the better pitching prospects in minor league baseball. I just want to see it for a little bit longer.
Yeah, if you can tolerate a lot of risk, I feel like he should come with a warning label. This is, a very toxic prospect, but one that could have a very high ceiling as one of the better pitching prospects in baseball. But, buyer beware.
It's always the same sort of thing with guys that start the year in the lower minors. Is there's some risk involved here, especially for somebody as unpolished as Lagrange was starting the year. Now he's in AA, so it becomes a little bit more palatable. He could be in Major League Baseball in a year or so. And, you really lower the risk that he's hurt before he debuts by a lot, right? He's just got less runway before he is productive in your lineup. So definitely far more intriguing today than he was on March 31st, for example. The buy from this week's column. So again, this is a player that I think is relatively undervalued. In weeks past, it has been players sort of outside of the top 250 prospect range. This week, it's a guy that made my top 100 in the offseason, or was at least consideration for the top 100. That's Alfredo Duno, catcher in the Red system. He's playing at single A, returning at single A this year after playing just 32 games at the level. In 2024, he dealt with a rib injury that held him out for large swaths of the season. Last week, he was 5 for 18 with a home run, a double, 3 runs, 2 RBI, and 7 walks. What's been really interesting is his last 30 games. It's a 297 average, a 486 on base percentage, and a 455 slugging percentage. And he's been walking more than he's striking out. He is sort of a physical specimen too. He's a big kid and has a ton of power. He moves pretty well for his size, but I expect him to slow down. And so the question becomes, where is he going to play? He is very raw behind the plate. And I think it's more likely than not that he's a first baseman when all is said and done. But he really might just have the power, especially for his age cohort, to play first base and not have to worry too much about sort of the offensive requirements of the position. Just a really, really exciting bat. I did check Chris's rankings before we jumped on, and he has Duno inside his top 100. I'm maybe not that bullish. If I had seen that before I wrote him as a buy, he would have been disqualified from this exercise. But I think when you see really smart people like Chris and like Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs pushing a player this young that aggressively, it warrants further investigation. What I'm, really concerned about is just the contact rate. He's running just under a 70% contact rate. Granted, he is young for full season ball, so maybe some of that comes around as he matures, but a really exciting young player that I think there are some volatile outcomes yet, but has caught my eye over the last 30 games as somebody young for the level, hitting for a lot of underlying power and walking more than he's striking out.
Yeah, he's a name that I've heard brought up a lot this year, getting some helium now. So I think he's still early enough to be qualified in the buy, even if some are regarding him as high as top 100 lists. But it's still a low A catcher. Like you said, large range of outcomes here. And not sure if the shift to first makes him more or less exciting as a prospect. But either way, the bat is going to be the carrying tools that kind of get him to move along the levels. So very fun guy to watch with a lot of upside.
Yeah, without question, really fun to watch, in part because you just don't see bodies like this at that level, and really exciting talent.
Yeah, so a couple other top performers I wanted to call out from the Threecap. The first was Jacob Marcy, outfielder in the Marlins system at AAA. This week he was 10 for 25 with 4 homers, 2 doubles, 5 runs, 5 RBI, and he swiped a bag. AFL standout, as you noted, in 2023. Was that right? We didn't see him last year. This was 2 years ago.
I believe it was 2023. I'm just pulling up his...
I think it was soon after he was traded to the Marlins.
Yes, correct. He was there as a Padre.
Correct. Yes, so right before. And yeah, he caught some eyes there. Was the AFL Player of the Year? Was that him or was that the other?
That was him. And he did it with a 391, 508, 707 slash over 24 games or 118 plate appearances. He did hit 5 home runs in that sample, which is about the most power he's ever displayed. And he is hitting the ball out of the yard this year. The 4 home runs is what really made me dig in because his underlying power has been, the exits have not been great. And so I wanted to see if anything had changed there. It was truly like 20 grade raw power, maybe 30. And that's about where it is now. Not quite that low. His 90th is about 2 miles an hour below the major league average, and his average exit 2-3 miles below the major league average. So not a lot of impact there. The other thing is he's not hitting for average the way that he did previously in his minor league career. Last year, he finished across AA and AAA with a flat 200 batting average, a 345 OBP, and a 315 slug. This year, through 70 games in the International League, 233, 371, 398. So highlighting here, not necessarily to say you should be in on Jacob Marcy, but really, I just wanted to do the exercise of what has changed with him. And it doesn't seem like a whole lot. He just got hot for a week, which it takes a lot of talent to get hot in the International League for a week.
Yep, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Was a name, like I said, that we had kind of become familiar with. And then after he was traded, we were like, oh, man, we just saw him. That's a really good piece going over there. So it was just a good check-in on what Jacob Marcy is up to.
Absolutely.
The other name I had here was Jonathan Santucci, left-handed pitcher for the Mets in their high A organization. He, this past week, threw 10 innings to 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, and 11 strikeouts. So not blown anyone away with those numbers, but a very solid couple of outings for him last week. Wanted to talk about him because I liked him when he was at Duke and really thought he'd be one of those to hit the ground running. And not that he isn't, he's already at high A, but after being taken in the second round in last year's draft. So I wanted to highlight as, a guy who the Mets pitching lab could maybe get their hands on, bringing over, some of that Brewers front office, and they've had a lot of success with pitching breakouts so far this year. So seeing Santucci on that list and kind of thinking of how I liked him coming out of the draft made me want to talk about him.
Yeah, I think the Mets have done a really excellent job in their pitching development. Nolan McLean gets a lot of attention. Jonah Tong has been absolutely unbelievable over the last 2 months. Jack Wenninger is also really standing out in that system. Jonathan Santucci has made some strides of his own. The real flag on him coming out of college was he has pretty good stuff. He hums the fastball in there 94 to 96, tops at 97, 98. The slider is pretty good. The problem was when he was at Duke, he didn't really have much control of anything. And he has cut his walk rate in half between his platform year at Duke and in the Mets system. And I think some of the punch out stuff has gone away as a result. His K per 9 obviously was going to fall a little bit between amateur and pro ball, but it's fallen off maybe more than I would have expected if I had known that he was going to have this sort of command control gain. And I'm really interested to see what the Mets can do with him moving forward. I think he's a guy that is worth monitoring with, a decent amount of developmental runway between high A and Major League Baseball.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this is going to take us into our promo section. Like you kind of teed off earlier, we have a lot of names to talk about, some of which we have talked about recently on the pod, so we'll keep those short, which transitions us nicely into talking about Chase Burns, who we opened the show with, but I want to turn it over to you, kind of do some cleanup on Chase Burns and talk about this debut that he had today.
Yeah, Chase Burns is an absolute monster. I've said it a number of times on this podcast that he's my number one pitching prospect in the sport. The list of major league pitchers I would not trade for Chase Burns in a dynasty league is rather short at the moment. It's a 70 fastball at least, incredible hop, sits 99. The slider is an absolute weapon. It had a whiff rate right around 50% before he was promoted. That 2-pitch mix, very much Spencer Strider-ish. The fact that he has a changeup that he can go to that flashed pretty good tonight, I think is a very similar thing where Strider really just needs one more pitch or needed one more pitch about 2 years ago that he could go to get lefties out and keep hitters at least a little bit off balance. Same sort of formula that we're working with for Chase Burns here. I don't care about the ballpark. I think that's a little bit overblown. We've seen pitchers beat Great American Small Park before. He is unbelievable. If Paul Skeens didn't exist, the hype for Chase Burns before his debut would have been through the roof. I think Paul Skeens has sort of ruined it for every other pitching prospect that's going to come through for the next 5 years. Is just, it's hard to be a better college pitcher than Paul Skeens was and then pull an 80 grade off-speed pitch out of your back pocket. So I love Chase Burns. I think he is phenomenal. I hope that he can stay healthy. Just really excited to have him in Major League Baseball. Although I was thinking about today, NL Central hitters for the next half decade have to deal with Paul Skeens, Chase Burns, and Jacob Misiorowski. I think Misiorowski is the one that I'm least confident in. Yeah. And that's still a terrifying at bat.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that from the Cubs fan perspective and, Squidward meme looking out to Patrick and SpongeBob playing. I want some of that. We got Cade Horton making his, debut so far this year and looking good, but he's not on the same tier of excitement as those guys. But really looking forward to facing that trio across our division. But there is with all three of those guys in the lead now, there's some chances we get some head-to-head between those three this season. So that will be must-see TV when it comes up.
When it comes up is tomorrow. We have Paul Skeens versus Jacob Misiorowski. So appointment television for Scully, maybe sooner than he was anticipating.
Nah, I knew that. That was a tee up for you.
Yeah, it's you throwing Cade Horton in the discussion is, if we're doing verbal memes on this podcast, it's the derpy dragon one, the 300 dragon. Yeah, I would much rather have the other three. I'm very happy that Jacob Mizorowski is a Milwaukee Brewer. Although there was some discourse I was seeing online today about, is there any player in Major League Baseball right now who people's understanding of who they are as a player, I'm butchering this, but is there any player in Major League Baseball who how they are perceived is more dependent on their next outing than Jacob Mizorowski?
Oh, 100%. His stance on top 100 versus top 50 was varying by start this year in AAA. And is he a reliever, is he not, was varying week to week. So, no, you're absolutely right on that. I thought you were going to say you saw people talking about, should the Brewers trade Mizorowski?
No. I think the trade proposals that have me a little bit riled up, and I'm not entirely against it, but it's just the idea of trading Freddie Peralta, who has a year and a half of control remaining, an $8 million club option for next year. I saw an ESPN piece that said the probability that he's traded is 20%. I don't know how they're calculating that. I would put it a little bit higher. But the Brewers, I mean, they were playing really, really well through the weekend. They swept Minnesota. I think if they are within shouting distance of first place, it becomes far less likely they trade him. But I digress. Chase Burns is extremely fun. Paul Skeens is extremely fun. Jacob Mizorowski is extremely fun. And Cade Horton is also there.
I have fun. A little bit of breaking news, very insignificant. But while we're talking Central, Nico Hoerner just hit his first home run of the season. He was one of two qualified hitters in baseball this year to not hit a home run. And some people were debating if he ever was going to again. So glad to see Nico got one out. Definitely going to have to see the video on that one.
This changes everything.
Yeah, you guys enjoy your pitchers. I've got Nico.
Our other Major League debut was Jack Perkins, right-handed pitcher for the Athletics, had made a couple of appearances on the Threecap. He debuted on Sunday, the 22nd, against Cleveland with 3 innings in relief, 1 hit, no earned, no walks, 2 strikeouts. He had made 9 AAA starts before that, totaling 44 innings pitched, so just a shade under 5 innings an outing. He pitched to a 2.86 ERA, struck out 68 in those 44 innings, walked 20, had a 1.02 whip, not giving up a lot of base runners despite sort of a higher walk rate. That walk rate has sat around 11% the last 2 seasons. Something's going on in Sacramento. They are developing pitchers really, really well between Perkins and Wei-En Lin, and probably the biggest pitching riser this year, Gage Jump. So, excited for Jack Perkins. I haven't really done the legwork to understand whether or not he's going to stay up, but a great debut, even in relief, 3 scoreless, 2 strikeouts.
Yeah, I didn't know what to read into that relief appearance being that. I don't know if it was just a soft landing or what their plan is with him, but everything I read was sort of big stuff guy. And the walk rate and lack of command is going to be what holds them back. But I didn't see anything too outlandish. I mean, 11% is really bordering on what's tolerable there. But the pure numbers, especially this year, like you read them off, are not bad. And even with an 11% walk rate, the whip is just above 1. He's pitching in the PCL. Now, not necessarily all of those 9 starts came in ballparks that are really bad for him, but right around a 1 whip is an elite mark. So even if you're walking a bunch of guys, as long as you're scattering them with your hits, you're going to be just fine. And he was handling AAA. So we'll see what sort of role the Athletics have in mind for him.
Yeah, there is a little bit of relief risk in there, just predicated on the walk rate. He has a shorter arm path. He kind of gator arms it a little bit, but his stuff is really good. The fastball is 94, 96. A lot of riding life, that sort of short arming it gives him a lower release point. So, the VAA is pretty flat. And then his slider is also very good. It's 2,800 RPMs of spin. It's one of the better breaking pitches in AAA. It doesn't necessarily stack up that way in Major League Baseball, but his reliance on those 2 pitches as his primary out-getters and sort of a lack of control does mean there's sort of an off-ramp here for Sacramento if they want to keep him in the bullpen. But sort of an exciting, I think, under the radar arm, and the A's system in general just doesn't get enough coverage.
And their bullpen's been really bad this year. So if he can give them bulk outings and appearances out of the bullpen, that's going to be very valuable for that young team. So maybe that is how they approach it this year, and then next year ramp them back up and figure it out then. But I'll move us into our next guy. Wikelman Gonzalez, right-handed pitcher for the White Sox, was called up this past week. He was, I think, the consensus fourth piece in that Crochet deal. And now the third of those four players to make his major league debut this year. So this is his third level of the year. He started in Double-A, and he started all four of his appearances there. But then all 12 of his appearances at Triple-A were as a reliever, so you have to imagine that's how they're going to use him, at least in the short term. So not sure what else you want to add on Gonzalez, but he did get his promo.
He did get his promo. Yeah, and nobody can ever take that from him. Just sort of recapping the Crochet deal, that was Kyle Teal, Braden Montgomery, Chase Mydroth, and Wikelman Gonzalez, and three of the four pieces are now in Chicago. I don't have a ton of interest in Wikelman Gonzalez, mostly because they pushed him to the bullpen in AAA. They are not sort of unfamiliar with putting guys in the bullpen and then putting them back in the rotation. There's not, a ton of competition for starts there. So always possible, but not a guy that I would be sort of putting in any fab bids on. We moved to AAA. We had 3 major league promotions. We now bring you 2 AAA promotions. The first one is Carter Jensen, who's kind of one of my guys. I had him 78th overall in the book. He was a third rounder in the 2021 draft out of a Kansas City area high school. Still just 21 years old, and will have the opportunity to debut at some point in the next year, potentially end of season for his hometown team, which is a really fun story. In 68 games at Double-A, he was slashing .292, .360, .420 with 6 home runs, 7 stolen bases, a 23% strikeout rate, and a 10% walk rate. He was one of the best hitters in the minors over the last 30 days. Power is really the carrying tool here. He's really athletic for a catcher. I would be unsurprised to see him play some corner outfield before he debuts. And just a huge fan. I think he is sort of been a slow burn for me. I was really buying into his 2024. We had the opportunity to see him in the AFL. Now playing really, really well over his last 30 days in Double-A, and he earns himself a promotion to Triple.
Yeah. The Royals have a couple of good catching prospects right now. Wonder if, either of them or any of them will be on the move come deadline time. But he was someone, like you said, saw in the fall league. And at first I was surprised to see him as a participant in the home run derby. But then I remember him very much holding his own. And that kind of changed my perspective on him. And I guess maybe I learned Carter Jensen at that point. But yeah, really impressive when we saw him down there and has some pop in that bat.
He, in the Arizona Fall League, it was only 12 games. So not a ton of sample for us to see him, but he slashed .425, .582, .800. So among the best performers in the circuit. Josue Briseño took home MVP honors. He played a lot more. He was similarly effective, but 2 sort of big, powerful catchers really putting the circuit on notice last fall.
Yeah.
The second AAA promotion, we bring it back to Milwaukee. I'm sitting over here like a proud dad. This is Coleman Crow, right-handed pitcher in the Brewers system. He was originally drafted by the Angels in the 28th round in 2019. You don't see, draft rounds that start with a 2 very often anymore. The only opportunity for that is the 20th round, as it was shortened during the COVID year to 5 rounds and never expanded back beyond 20. He was traded to the Mets in June of 2023 for Eduardo Escobar, and later that year acquired by Milwaukee. This was sort of the first trade that David Stearns, former Brewers GM, and Matt Arnold, new Brewers GM, orchestrated as members of their respective front offices. The returning pieces in this deal, Milwaukee sent Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor. It was a little bit disappointing that Coleman Crow missed the 2024 season with Tommy John. He had a strong start in 2023, 24 innings pitched, a 1.88 ERA, 31 strikeouts to 6 walks. Now he's healthy and he's pitching extremely well. And the fastball and the curveball look lethal. He is sitting in AAA now. After 10 games in AA. That was 43 innings. He had a 2.51 ERA, 52 strikeouts to 8 walks. That is a fantastic strikeout to walk rate. I don't know how he breaks through. The Brewers have somehow too much pitching right now. They're going to have to figure out what to do with Chad Patrick when Brandon Woodruff comes back. And I don't really think there's opportunity for Coleman Crow. But the Brewers could be active at the trade deadline, sending out some of this talent, finding some solves for shortstop and third base primarily. But Coleman Crow has been really, really good. If you have not watched any Coleman Crow film, his curveball is beautiful. It is a sight to behold.
Yeah, the PP heads don't get to peek behind the curtain and see the show sheet, but I did not expect to have this much to write about Coleman Crow, but he was a fascinating dig. And seeing the AA numbers to this point and what he was doing before TJ in that small sample, I was surprised not to see him on Pipeline's top 30 prospects for the Brewers. Maybe they're thinking of him not really as a prospect. Is this ageism? But looking at the numbers, I just thought it was very interesting and thought he might be deserving of that, understanding that the Brewers have a top tier system in baseball.
Yeah, I think part of it had to do with the fact that he was on the shelf for almost 2 years. He is 24. He turned 24 on December 30th. December 30th, 2000. That's a fun birthday. But, I wouldn't necessarily be jumping all over Coleman Crow at this point. He was a pretty highly regarded prep, at least locally. He didn't go until the 28th round. I'm not sure if that's because he had a commitment to a school. And when he has been healthy, he has been very good. His minor league ERA is maybe a little bit misleading. Most of this is coming in Rocket City in 2022, but overall ERA of 4.02, 9.5 strikeouts per 9, 2.7 walks per 9. This year, all of those numbers have ticked up, and he's seeing sort of the best performance of his career.
Yeah, maybe he does break through in the bullpen, being an immediate way to help the big league club. But either way, someone will be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Milwaukee does over the next 5 weeks or so with all of the surplus pitching they suddenly have.
Yeah. Moving us into AA. Probably the most exciting name, not Chase Burns, that we'll talk about today. Lazaro Montes, DH for the Mariners, got the promo to AA. And he was Beck's 57th prospect coming into the year, so I want to know if that's changed at all. But he was an IFA guy in 22 for $2.5 million out of Cuba. He's that kind of rare DH in the top 100. You don't see a lot of profiles like this. I combined his 118 high A game sample over the last 2 years, as the numbers were pretty similar. And over 440 at-bats, he slashed 265, 386, 509 with 26 homers, 18 of those coming so far this year, 83 RBI. He strikes out at a 28% clip, but that doesn't really matter when you're walking 15% of the time and slugging over 500. So talk to me about Montes.
I think so. There's a lot going on here. I had a conversation with Eric on the Tool Shed about how it's really difficult to know what to do with these guys who have sort of elite top end outcomes. With Montes, I'm talking about the power. He is a physical specimen. He hits the ball extremely hard. He is one of a handful of prospects that could feasibly hit 40 home runs in a season at some point in their career. The problem is he's very limited defensively. I think it's almost certainly not an outfield corner at this point. Maybe he can handle first base, but that does put a lot of pressure on his bat to be good. The other thing, is his contact rates are really poor. The 28% strikeout rate over 442 at-bats in high A, I think is pretty telling. The pitching isn't necessarily excellent there. I think that is going to get worse. The 15% walk rate, he's not going to be able to nibble so much and get on his base as often as he has. So it's precarious. I still don't know what to do with him because the top end outcome, similar to a guy like Spencer Jones, for example, or on the pitching side, somebody like Jacob Mizorowski, the 90th percentile outcome is just so unfathomable that you can't really bury these guys. He hasn't really done much to change his stock. Maybe he would move down a little bit just because guys are leapfrogging him at this point. And the longer his sort of bat to ball goes unaddressed, the more concerned I get. he's one of the more popular players on social media, I think, because he passes the bus test. When you see him get off the bus, he looks like the best player on the field. And the home runs are sort of towering, and they're great for sort of Twitter videos. But he's a deeply confounding prospect when you really start to break it down.
Yeah. He is kind of everyone's prospect darling. You'll see him on everyone's favorite lists. And, when you do the build your team, your prospect team, he feels to be like everyone's DH. But just a really exciting hitting prospect coming up for the Mariners, a team that, besides this year, has seemingly been void of offensive talent coming up. They do hit a lot of home runs this year, but hopefully we get to see him kind of doing that within the next couple of years at the major league level.
I had a brain fart and for whatever reason thought the Mariners AA was the Modesto nuts. And I was like, okay, we've got 3 nuts. And then we're going to talk about Michael Arroyo. And that would have been 4 nuts in one podcast, which is probably a record. But no, their AA is the Arkansas Travelers. So we're going to miss out on that record today. But let's talk a little bit about Michael Arroyo, who we covered last week. We said he was likely to be promoted. And there it was. So, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am pretty good at this, I think.
I do. And the stars were talking to us, and we nailed it.
If you want maybe a longer breakdown of Michael Arroyo beyond the next 30 seconds I'm going to give you, feel free to boot up last week's episode. Arroyo doesn't necessarily have outlier tools. He's sort of a bag of 50s. I think you could feasibly put a 55 on the hit. Maybe if you're feeling generous, a 55 on the power. I think he's going to struggle a little bit when he gets to Arkansas, but has been phenomenal in high A so far. I think if you have people in your league that are willing to buy based on surface numbers in minor league baseball, you should consider shopping him. I think he has the potential to be sort of a milquetoast everyday second baseman. There's maybe a little bit more pop than you would otherwise expect from the second base position, but he sort of gets overlooked in this system because he is not flashy. He's a little bit boring, but he's a pretty good player overall. He is a favorite of some of the guys over at P Live. I'm not quite there with them, but excited for him to see what he can do in AA.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take us into our next guy, Ryan Waldschmidt, outfielder for the Diamondbacks. He was the 31st overall pick, the PPI pick in the 24 draft out of Kentucky. In 68 high A games this year, he slashed 268, 415, 447 with 9 homers, 43 RBI already. And he swiped 10 bags, and he's striking out just about as much as he's walking. So another example of a college bat kind of coming in and doing what he should at the high A level. It's a power speed kind of combo at the plate. The glove is, lagging, but seems sufficient in a corner, primarily left, because I don't think the arm is stellar. But someone whose bat is going to earn him promotions like it did this past week.
Yeah, he played left at Kentucky too, so I would imagine that that's where he's going to stick long term. This is a guy that I wish I was higher on coming into the year. He had, I considered him for the top 100. I did not get him in the book. He was one of the very last cuts. His platform year at the University of Kentucky, just the data I have in front of me, I don't have his baseball reference page up, so some of these might be just a little bit off. 325 batting average, 463 on base percentage, 604 slug. That is a 1.067 OPS, 14 home runs in that time. His underlying data was super interesting. This obviously is coming with metal, so it's going to be lower when we get a look at the underlying data with wood. But his average exit velocity was 92.6 miles an hour. That was in the 93rd percentile for Division I bats. His 90th percentile exit velocity, 109.2 miles an hour. That was in the 98th percentile. His chase rate was 16.5%. Very, very judicious. That was in the 87th percentile. And his zone contact rate was 80.2% in the 72nd percentile. So you can see sort of an array of plus tools among Division I bats, those being the swing decision profile, the bat to ball, and the underlying power. He is obviously playing as though those tools are still present. barely striking out more than he's walking, already clubbed 9 home runs, has an astonishing 43 RBI already in 68 games. He has swiped a few bags, as Scully said. A guy that I would be considering right around a top 50 overall prospect at the moment, if not just a little bit outside.
Yeah, and this kind of gives us a chance to talk about something we haven't brought up a lot before, but we'll reference a lot of real-life prospect lists when we do this. But you write from a fantasy perspective, and he screams someone to me that is going to be better in a fantasy landscape, especially in points leads with that high on base, maybe better than he would be a real-life prospect, because we don't really care about the glove. We care about the glove as much as it affords them opportunity to get promotions and to get to the big leagues and to start. But really, bats store you points and win you fantasy matchups. The glove doesn't really do much for you. So this is just one of those guys who you should be targeting, especially in a points lead format, because he's going to be doing better in that landscape than he will be doing in real life, probably.
Yeah, I think you put that perfectly. We care about the glove insofar as it grants them opportunities and keeps them in the lineup, but defensive utility, it matters far less for fantasy baseball. I also think the public is a little bit behind on Ryan Waldschmidt. There's been some hype, but not a guy that I think is among the biggest breakouts or discussed as among the biggest breakouts this year. And I really think he should be considered in that group. So very high on Ryan Waldschmidt. He was a guy that I wanted the Brewers to take. Ultimately happy with how that draft worked out, but outside of not signing Chris Livonis. But Ryan Waldschmidt is a guy that I think is worth targeting both on the wire, certainly if he's out there, and via trade. The next player we have is also another college draftee. This one did make the book at 69th. Nice. Overall, this is Carson Benge. Or Benge, apologies. Outfielder for the Mets. He was coming out of Oklahoma State. Was the 19th pick last summer. So far this year in 60 games at high A. 225 at bats, slashing 302, 417, 480 with 4 home runs, 15 stolen bases, and 50 strikeouts to 41 walks. Pretty good approach there. I think he has above average tools across the board. I actually think the underlying power is significantly more impressive than the game power. There's some mechanical issues going on there where he struggles to pull the ball. He also struggles to get the ball in the air. If they are able to unlock that, he is going to be an extremely dynamic player in the outfield. When he was at Oklahoma State. So again, these numbers I got from a source that had synergy access, so they might not be totally finalized from when they were released, but 336 batting average, 444 OBP, 668 slug. That is a 1.112 OPS, 18 home runs, and a 165 WRC plus with the Cowboys. His average exit velocity, 93.1. That's in the 94th percentile among Division I bats last year. His 90th percentile exit velocity, 106.4 miles an hour. That is a 90th percentile mark. His chase rate was 20%. That is in the 69th nice percentile. And his zone contact was 84%. That was in the 90th percentile. So he had a little bit of a deficiency against spin. He liked to swing out of the zone and expand against spin, especially same side spin. He handled off speed really well. He handled velocity really well. He hit the ball extremely hard throughout his entire platform. Campaign at Oklahoma State. I was, among his biggest fans this offseason. He's playing quite well, and he's being rewarded with a bump to Double-A. I do think there are some mechanical issues that the Mets need to help him figure out. He has an unorthodox swing. It does mean that he's sort of going the other way more often than you might like. It also means he's putting it on the ground a little bit too often. But a really exciting, dynamic player should he figure all of that out.
Very interesting. We talk about these two back-to-back. Couple of points, because the 2024 draft is looking like a really, really good one, all things considered. And especially going into the draft, it was not lauded as such. But interesting to have these two guys kind of performing very similar slash lines. Benge, obviously a higher average, but Waldschmidt doing a little bit more damage from the counting stat perspective. So how do you think about ranking these two? You mentioned you had Benge in the top 70, and you have Waldschmidt now around 50. So where do you have these two?
I think right around where I had Benge is where he will stay until I see him put the ball in the air and or pull more regularly, preferably both. So far this year, he's running a 29% fly ball rate, which is pretty abysmal, 45% ground ball rate. His oppo percentage is almost eclipsing his pull percentage. That is just going to, I think, hamper his overall production. I'm still bullish on the idea that the Mets can help him figure out how to sort of lift and launch to the pull side. Waldschmidt, on the other hand, is doing a lot of things really, really well. I think it is similar sort of ceilings, but the path to actualizing that ceiling is much clearer to me for Ryan Waldschmidt than it is for Carson Benge.
Yeah. It's nice when you see this as two guys that are rising or at least maintaining. And it's not a conversation of one is dropping out of the conversation. Regardless, both are exciting prospects and are getting this AA promo at the same time.
Yes, sir. Okay, we are moving to a pitcher now in Boston. That is Peyton Tolle, left-handed pitcher, big boy. We've had a couple of big boys to talk about today. He might be the biggest. He is 6'6", 250 pounds. He was a second rounder out of TCU at high A. He threw 11 games. That's 10 starts, 49.2 innings pitched, a 3.62 ERA, 79 strikeouts to 14 walks. That is a 38% K rate to 7% walk rate. That is an elite K minus BB. The fastball velocity is up this year. He used to sit low 90s. It does also play up with elite extension. It is a low release, long extension, better velocity pitch. He is leaning on it a ton. That is by far his most used offering. And so I'll be a little anxious to see how the rest of his arsenal develops. But in terms of putting away high A batters so far this year and sort of what the Red Sox have been able to do developmentally, very excited about Peyton Tolle. He, if there's anybody that's going to be able to turn in sort of workhorse numbers on the mound, it's a guy with his frame. And it's hard to overstate just how good the fastball is.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good hoss on the mound. And I think he crosses the threshold of hoss status. And yeah, like you said, he could be a workhorse for them. And what catches your eye, we're talking air pull from a hitter perspective. We've talked about K minus BB being simple, but very effective when analyzing pitchers. And he's got an elite one. Anything over 30% is considered elite. So he is right there. Really fun to watch. And like I said, love a hoss, also love an elite fastball.
Love a hoss. I will maybe contradict you there. And it's not because I think you're wrong in any way. This is just a personal preference thing. I love a big old pitcher that all they do is throw bendy stuff. When Lance Lynn was good, there was no better viewing experience than him just being hefty and throwing bendies.
When we say hoss, we talk big guy on the mound, and especially to that archetype, I think of David Wells.
Yeah, hell yeah. That rocks. Right up my alley. That's one of my favorite kinds of pitchers to watch.
You've got a type.
Neither here nor there. We moved to Jacob Reimer in the Mets system. So we've kind of been there and back in this section. Both Carson Benge and Jacob Reimer, third baseman, getting the bump to AA. Reimer, for his part, fourth round pick in 2022 as a high schooler. He played in 61 high A games before the promotion, logged 229 at bats, /284, 384, 502 with 8 home runs, 11 stolen bases, and 52 strikeouts to 32 walks. One of the biggest risers overall this year. He was unranked for Chris, for example, entering the year, that being in a top 500. He is now top 100 as of June, and it's because he's been awesome. He was also, I believe he was a guy that was in the AFL, but I can't remember for the life of me.
Yep, he was.
And I remember coming away from that sort of relatively unimpressed. Yeah, he slashed over 17 games, 208, 371. He walked more than he struck out, but 350, he wasn't doing a lot of damage, and it's a pretty hitter-friendly environment out there. He has just tied a career high in home runs with 8. This time in 61 games, he hit 8 of them in 2023 across 102 games. So a real tick up in the game power. This is the first time he slugged over 500. Just a really interesting bat to watch, and is obviously getting picked up by both fantasy and sort of real life baseball publications as a big time riser.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to reconcile seeing him rise so much on Chris's ranking, seeing the stats. All of those are up arrows for him. But then, you reference our AFL stint watching him, small sample, obviously, but I don't remember him standing out necessarily. And Fangraphs and Pipeline have the grades in the 40s to 50s, nothing really above average in the profile. Now, they can be behind, as those things typically go, but interesting to see how he'll be recognized by others in the industry, and if they're going to up those ratings if he keeps it up this way. But so far, a really good campaign at high A.
So just a few things on sort of Reimers. I'm pulling up my AFL notes. Good contact skills and approach. I dug in after we left, and he had a contact rate of 78% or higher, sort of at every level throughout his minor league career. I recall him looking strong in that 6 foot frame. It's 6 foot, 205 pounds. The one thing sort of jumping out to me on his Fangraphs page this year is his air rate is up over 10 percentage points to his career. And, I'd have to just intuit based on sort of the uptick in damage that he's probably hitting the ball harder than he ever has. So I haven't spent a ton of time digging into him, but definitely one of the biggest risers. I think right around top 100 feels right at this point in the calendar.
Yeah, that'll take us into high A. And our one high A promotion is in the Mets system again. The Mets were very busy this week. They promoted Colin Houck to high A. I listed him as an infielder because he's been splitting time at all positions evenly between second and third primarily. And he's having better success at third base, it looked like, from the surface. I didn't watch any film necessarily, but Houck was the 32nd overall pick in the 23 draft out of high school. He spent all of 24 in low A. To pretty poor results. I didn't put the slash line on here, but it was bad. The notable stat was a 42% K rate. So they were looking for that to come down, and it did. It's down to 33%, still not sustainable in what you want to see, but the rest of the kind of profile is more interesting and looking better than that. Through 62 games, he is slashing 252, 351, 461 with 8 home runs, 5 triples, and 11 bags. So kind of a speed glove bat, but you were digging into the batted profile. Want to tell us more about Houck?
Yeah, I don't really understand how he's striking out this much based on the underlying data. That was the most confounding thing to me. It's an 81% zone contact rate in the Florida State League, a 26% chase rate. It looks like the problem is that when he chases, he's not making any contact at all. It's a pretty steep drop off between his zone contact and his overall contact rate. He's also hitting the ball pretty hard for his age. It's a 104 mile an hour EV90. I'm sort of leaving the I would say deep dive, but I really spent like 15 minutes digging into Colin Houck upon his promotion. I'm sort of leaving that investigation more confused than when I entered it. The results are better. That tends to happen when you cut your K rate by 10%, but often when you're cutting your K rate by 10%, it's not going from 42 to 33. So I'm not totally sure. I did really like Colin Houck in that draft cycle. I'm pretty out on him now. I can't figure out what's going on here. He's a pretty good athlete. The speed and the glove are carrying tools. Looks like he should be able to handle shortstop, but has enough arm to play third if he needs to. Not a guy I would be buying necessarily because I can't figure out why he's striking out so much.
Yeah, we're going to learn more as he gets to high A.
Yes, certainly we will. All right, so we will move to, we just had the one promotion to high A. We have 3 to single A to round out the show. The first is Devin Fitz-Gerald, not Fitzgerald all the way through. It is Fitz, Fitz-Gerald, Gerald. He's a shortstop in the Texas Rangers system. He was a 5th rounder in 2024 out of Stoneman Douglas. If that school sounds familiar to you, that's because there have been a lot of recent standouts coming from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. In Florida, some names that come to mind immediately are Jesus Luzardo, Kobe Mayo, Roman Anthony, and of course now Devin Fitz-Gerald, who is equally as notable as those guys. He's been one of the buzzier guys at the complex level this year so far. He's played 31 games there before promotion, 107 at bats. He's got that coveted 3.45 slash line with a 3.18 batting average, a 423 on base percentage, and a 542 slugging percentage. Walking more than he's striking out, 17 walks to 15 strikeouts, 6 home runs, 5 stolen bases. Looks very dynamic at shortstop. So far since promotion, he's played all 3 of his appearances there. He did split most of his time at the complex between second and third. So maybe a little bit of defensive utility there. Still waiting to see where he settles in. Nice to know that he can handle shortstop so far.
Yeah. I don't often dig into complex guys. That's not, the type of runway that I typically have with my roster, but I did add Fitz-Gerald a couple of weeks ago. Just seeing the stats and hearing the buzz coming from the complex, I took a flyer on him, and I was almost immediately validated from a text from you last week that says, "Oh, good job getting in on Fitz-Gerald that early," and it just felt good to win one. So glad to see that, and obviously the promo follow. I think it was coinciding with that text, but really excited from what I've seen from Fitz-Gerald, and looking forward to seeing him at low A. I will admit that seeing him out of Stoneman Douglas and hearing how your references to it in the book, especially when talking about Roman Anthony, that did raise off some alarms to me, and was a factor in why I added him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's validating. That is a school with a pretty decent track record. Fitz-Gerald, pretty good athlete. He's turning in above average run times. He has great bat speed. He's getting the ball in the air into the pull side. The more I dig in, especially in prep for this episode, the more interested I am in Devin Fitz-Gerald, which is how I'm going to say his name permanently now. I can't help it. Really good sort of speculative flyer. So do as Scully does and get him on your roster if you have an open spot. This looks like one of the more promising preps taken last year. He was one of the top prep bats in Florida, got a $900,000 signing bonus to be lured away from an NC State commitment.
I was going to ask where. NC State, interesting. They had a good ball club this year, typically do. But moving on to our next guy, Yandel Ricardo, shortstop in the Royals system. He was a 24 IFA guy for $2.4 million out of DR. In 33 games of the complex this year and 120 at-bats, he slashed 342, 438, 533, another coveted 345 slash line. Had 2 home runs, 17 bags, 5 triples, and 35 strikeouts to those 18 walks. I was curious to see that Fangraphs has a 50 and 60 on the power potential, both raw and game power. I thought that was interesting for a guy who's 6'1", 180 and hasn't necessarily displayed. Hasn't at least put the ball over the fence. I'm not sure what his batted ball data looks like. No one does. But curious to see that, and makes sense why people are so high on Ricardo at this point.
Yeah, he's sort of an interesting story for 2 reasons. One, he was the Royals' top international free agent in 2024. They shelled out $2.4 million to secure his services. For those curious, that is a 2, a 4, and 5 zeros, which is probably more money than I'll see in my life. And he didn't really live up to it in the DSL. It was a disappointing slash line. Sort of the tools that were foretold didn't really make their way onto the field. He's also sort of a newer switch hitter, which I think makes the power grade even a little bit more curious. It's more pop from the right side. He's a natural right-handed hitter. He's just started hitting left-handed as well. He's whiffing a little bit more than I'd like. If I had to choose one between Devin Fitz-Gerald and Yandel Ricardo, it would be pretty firmly Devin Fitz-Gerald for me. I have to stop doing that. It is Fitz-Gerald. But it would. I like Devin far more than I like Yandel at this moment. If I were going to, tell people to take a speculative flyer, it would almost certainly be on the Floridian.
Love that.
Okay, we are going to end the show with one more victory lap. This is Edward Florentino, first baseman / outfielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Covered him as Beck's buy last week and talked about the possibility of a promotion to single A, and he's done it. The darn kid did it, got himself a promotion to full season ball. Really exciting, dynamic player. He might be a full-time first baseman when all is said and done. just because he's so large already, he, is credibly listed at 6'4", 200 pounds at the time of signing. He has gotten bigger. It's likely he's going to slow down, but looks like a really dynamic offensive force. And he was playing extremely well at the complex before he got that bump. Single A will certainly be a challenge for him. He is young for the level, but exciting nonetheless to, nail another one.
Yeah. Hope you bought when we told you to last week, because the price of brick is going up.
I think that's a good place to end it. Well, maybe I'll sort of shamelessly plug The Wire is a top 4 TV show of all time. It is in my Mount Rushmore of TV shows. Maybe for next episode, we can do some banter on our Mount Rushmore of TV shows.
Yeah. Shouts out The Wire.
All right, man. It's been great. Love you. Bye.
As always, love you. Bye.